Now, what makes a good movie good? During the early 2000s, a movie titled Scary Movie would hit the theaters, and it ended up being one of the best scary movies to date, in my opinion, of course. Scary Movie did something way different than any movie during that time. The movie itself was a parody on scary movies that recently released, like the movie Scream and I Know What You Did Last Summer. The movie knew how to make a joke of itself and the movies that they were making fun of. This movie that we watch today is not that, so take everything that you know and love from the Scary Movie franchise, like Scary Movie 1 and 2, and throw them in the trash and just burn and light the whole entire trash can on fire. Today we review Superhero Movie starring Drake Bell, who in real life ended up turning into a supervillain. So, I mean, nobody really saw that coming. Superhero Movie released in 2008, a couple months after the show Drake and Josh ended. The movie was directed by David Zucker, who also directed Scary Movie 3, 4, and Scary Movie 5. The movie had a budget of $35 million and only made $71 million at the box office. Now, a lot of these parody movies during the 2000s were made by the writers of Scary Movie, but I was surprised to find out that this one wasn't. This movie has a lot of issues that slow down the pacing of the movie. Superhero Movie parody Spider-Man, with Drake Bell being the lead actor, playing a kid named Rick Riker. The opening scene starts with Rick chasing after the school bus and then slamming into the side mirror of the bus and then getting up and slamming into the stop sign and then getting up again and then will get hit by the bus doors opening. This happens a lot in this movie where they will repeat or overplay a funny moment over and over and over again, which makes it not funny anymore. Once Rick finally makes it onto the bus, he sits next to his friend Trey, who is played by Kevin Hart. During this scene, the director makes it seem like Trey is a nerd who has a lot of Apple products, but it just makes it unfunny to keep the bit going for so long. And I shit you not, these repetitive bits where these scenes last too long happens a lot throughout the first part of this movie. Trey talks about how he's excited to go on this class trip, and Rick talks about his crush Jill Johnson, who is a stand-in for MJ from Spider-Man. Jill happens to be dating the class bully Lan. The class finally makes it to their destination, which happens to be an animal research lab owned by Lou Launders, who is Lance's uncle. During this scene, Lance would push Rick into poop, and Rick cleans himself off with some type of liquid that Rick thinks is water. This liquid turns out to be a super animal attraction liquid. This makes all the animals attracted to Rick and hump him because I guess during that time, that was the form of comedy back then. Jill would talk to the scientist and tell him that there's a dragonfly missing, and Rick would get bit by that dragonfly. Rick bumps into the cabinet and pours a whole bottle of liquid onto him, and then all of these animals run at him. We then are introduced to Aunt Lucille and Uncle Albert, who is played by Leslie Nielsen. Honestly, I really liked Uncle Albert in this movie. I thought he was the only funny one, and whenever he was on screen, I actually would laugh a lot of the times, but everything else about this movie wasn't it. Rick comes home and goes straight upstairs. We are then introduced to Lou Launders, played by Christopher McDonald, who is a stand-in for Dr. Osborn. Lou has a terminal illness and tries to heal himself. The machine goes crazy, and he believes that it didn't work until one of the colleagues pulls up to make fun of him to say that his invention didn't work, and Lou ends up grabbing his wrist and draining his life. This heals Lou, but it's only temporary. Lou will have to continue to do this to stay alive. The next scene at school, a fight breaks out between Rick and Lance when Rick accidentally hits Lance with a water fountain that he got stuck to. This is when Rick finds out that he has superpowers. He climbs up walls and then saves an old lady who was about to get hit by a tractor trailer. Actually, scratch that. She actually flew into a wood chipper because he tried to push her out of harm's way. Rick makes his way home and tells Trey and Uncle Albert that he has superpowers because he got bit by the dragonfly. He tells Uncle Albert that he's not his father, and Albert has the best comeback that I've heard in a while.
That isn't what your parents wanted for you.
You're not my father.
But I love you like your father did. I believe in you like your father did. I had sex with your mother just like your father did.
You'll never understand me.
Rick goes outside and looks at the ring his father gave him, and then we learn how his father and mother died, and spoiler, it's because of him. Jill comes out of her house and they talk. Jill tells Rick that she hopes that he will give her a ride in his car one day. So like any teenager, he goes inside and looks for cheap cars on the internet. He then goes with Aunt Lucille to get a loan, and this is when we see Uncle Albert get shot. Eventually, Professor Xavier comes and takes Rick to the mutant school. This whole scene is pretty much filler, and it just didn't need to be in the movie. Regina Hall comes in at the end of the scene and tells Rick to make a costume, and that's pretty much what the whole scene was leading up to, and it didn't really need to be in the movie. Rick makes a dragonfly costume and starts to fight crime, and then this would happen. Lou needs to find Ceruleum to make sure he doesn't die, so he tries to steal it from Stephen fucking Hawking. Oh, I completely forgot to mention that Lou turns into the supervillain named Hourglass. Get it? Because he has a limited amount of time to live. This is what he looks like. Dragonfly and the Hourglass meet for the first time around the 43-minute mark of the movie, and the Hourglass throws titanium blades at Dragonfly. Hourglass escapes, and Rick goes back home to get patched up. Trey helps clean Rick's wounds and talks about his inability to fly and how that's his kryptonite. Rick meets up with Jill and they talk, and as she leaves, he notices a group of muggers following her, so he gets into costume and stops the muggers that were about to attack Jill, and at the end of the scene, they end up kissing. The Hourglass creates his machine that will bring him immortality if he's able to kill a big group of people. Jill, Lance, and Lou pull up to Rick's house for Thanksgiving dinner, and this is where we get another drawn-out gag. Remember in the original Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire, when he comes home with the Spider-Man suit on and Osborn goes into his room to call him down for dinner? Well, this movie does that too because, of course, it's a parody, but this is so drawn out and it just makes it not funny. Eventually, Rick comes through the front door and sits with them at the table for dinner. This is when Lou learns that Rick is the Dragonfly. And right after this, we get a farting scene that once again goes on for far too long that ends up with Aunt Lucille dying and the doctor telling Rick not to tell Uncle Albert yet because it'll put him into stress, but then the doctor just tells Uncle Albert anyways that Lucille died. After this, we probably get one of the funniest scenes in the movie, which happens to be the funeral scene. After that scene, Rick tells Jill that he doesn't want to date her and he ends up getting depression. Trey and Uncle Albert tell him to snap out of it and he says that he's no superhero, he doesn't even know how to fly. But eventually he snaps out of it and goes to the big gathering where Hourglass plans to strike. He gets there and confronts Lou, saying that someone at the gathering is Hourglass, not realizing that he's speaking to him. A big fight ensues with everyone at the gathering, and Lou would reveal that he's the Hourglass. Rick would crush himself with a big piece of wall, which is not funny, and Hourglass would say that it's too late and throws a titanium blade that Jill jumps in front of. Stephen Hawking tells Rick that he has to stop the Hourglass, so Rick goes to the roof with Jill, and Hourglass once again tells him it's too late and now throws a sticky bomb at him. But Rick backflips to Hourglass and the bomb explodes in Hourglass's face, killing the Hourglass. But during this whole riot, Jill ends up falling from the building. So Rick jumps down and tells her that he never let anything bad happen to her, and he finally gets his dragonfly wing. The movie ends with both of them flying in the air, but they get hit by a helicopter, and then there's 15 minutes of credits. Now here are my final thoughts on the movie. And of course, keep this lightly because I do know they weren't trying to make a masterpiece because it's just a parody, but I do think if they focus less on drawing out jokes, the movie would be decent. That's the thing about it. The first Scary Movie and the second Scary Movie were both extremely funny because they would say something or do something that was so quick, but you would laugh at it. It wouldn't be something that was drawn out. I did find myself laughing a lot of the time when Leslie Nielsen was on the screen, but other than that, the acting just wasn't great. Drake as a superhero just reminds me of him playing Drake from Drake and Josh, and that's never good to be associated with one show and not being able to grow as an actor. His acting was too much like a sitcom, and I felt like at times there should have been a laugh track after he made some sort of face gesture or physical gesture during the movie. This movie's writing was so bad that even Kevin Hart wasn't funny in the limited screen time that he had. I don't think it's the worst parody movie on the market and throughout this time, and it had somewhat of a plot, unlike other parody movies that came out around this time. But if you want me to check out the movies like Disaster Movie or Epic Movie, let me know in the comments below. This has been the end of the movie review. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like, and if this is your first time ever viewing any of my content, make sure to go ahead and subscribe. Let me know in the comments below what movie I should talk about next. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.